Words matter with Chef Don Splain. Yay! All right, Chef Don here. Welcome to Words Matters. Today, we're going to be talking about pretty much the impetus for this whole entire series. And it comes down to this word right here, brine. Brine. I see on so many videos, so many people cooking that they're talking about dry brine. Dry brine does not exist. Brine, by definition, is wet. So when you think of brine shrimp live in water. I'm trying to think of other things that have like brine, but basically brine is a curing method. We're using salt and water to basically pull out moisture from an ingredient, and through that osmosis, you're replacing the moisture in the product with salt and flavor from the brine. And that is, by definition, a brine. Now, if you take the water away, that's just a cure. Now, people who use cures, I kind of have to laugh because I see people doing it, and it's like, okay, we're gonna cure this, when really they're just seasoning it. It's not actually curing. So curing is the preservation method. And so today we're going to get into a little bit about curing, brining, and how those things play in the preservation of food. Scraps when I was cleaning up beef plate for a party, and also bottom round. And bottom round, I think, is a really underused meat when it comes to making things like pastrami and corned beef. When everyone says corned beef, you automatically think brisket, but there's other cuts you can use as well. So our total weight today, 9.361 kilograms or 20.64 pounds. This is my total breakdown. We need this number to figure out how much of the cure or the brine that we're going to need to make the corned beef. So right here we have the different pieces of meats. So we have piece of plate, and then these are kind of the trim that I use. I was gonna use it for burger, but I'm going to corn this, and then I'm gonna actually turn these into pastrami. And then this is my bottom round. Again, this is, I believe, is a really underused piece of meat in the corning process, but it makes really, really lean. And when you clean this up, it'll be square. It's perfect for bread. I might end up turning this into pastrami too. So these are the pieces of meat that I'm going to be using, and ultimately going to brine it and make it absolutely delicious. Total for the brine. Now when I make this, what I do is I take 2 gallons of water with all of the ingredients, and then I hold 2 gallons of ice, which comes out to 16 pounds, that once I make my brine, what I'll do is I'll add ice in to cool it and get it to the proper hydration for the curing process when we corn this beef. So we're gonna need 900 grams of salt. Close enough. Now we're going to add our 150 grams of sugar. Look at that right there. So now we're going to measure out our 40 grams of pickling spice. I usually go a little bit extra just because I'm a little bit extra. So now we're going to add our dehydrated celery juice. We need, let's say, 20 grams. There we go. So here we are, ready to start our brine. So I put my water on. No, not a lot of science behind that. We'll add our salt. I already mixed the celery in with the spices. Add my sugar. And then we'll let that basically cook for about 20 minutes. When I say cook, slow simmer. I don't want this at a rapid boil, just because, like I said, the more steam that comes off of it, the less you're gonna lose your flavor. So we're gonna bring this up to a simmer, let it simmer for about 20 minutes, and then we'll add the ice to get it to the quantity that we need. So just in case there's any questions, this is what 16 pounds of my ice cube looks like. Right there at the 15 liter, 16 quart mark. So now's the moment of truth. We already have our 16 pounds of ice. Okay, so this right here is called a brine pump. This is what we use to get the brine into meat, so that way it can cure a little bit quicker. And so you have basically your 4 parts. You have your brining needle, which screws on to the top, right there like that. You have your plunger. Plunger goes in, this locks in like that, and then this here locks in here. This part goes into your actual brine. You have a nice filter in here, it keeps all particles out, so that way all of those little holes stay clear when you're in the brining process. So this is a brining needle, or a brine pump. So this right here is the bottom round, and really all I've done to prep it so far is remove a piece of silver skin that runs across this backside right here. I'm not going to clean all this up. If I was going to any other process, I would. And basically, if you break it down right along this seam right there, this ends up being pretty much square. It makes an absolutely perfect sandwich meat. Again, this is the bottom round. Go right here, take the needle, shove it here, and pump. So using a brine pump is great for doing large pieces of meat. But what you have to remember is that you can't just pump it full of brine and expect that it's going to be done in a exponentially quicker fashion than just letting it soak in the brine. As I mentioned, in the brine, you're talking about a 1/4 inch per 24 hours. And you have to think about that over the whole surface of the meat. So it's a 1/4 inch top, 1/4 inch bottom. If you want to say it's a 1/2 inch, okay, that's a 1/2 inch. But when you're doing your math, that's kind of what you're figuring on. And when you use the brine pump, what happens is you get that high salinity into the center of the meat. And what you need to do is let it reach an equilibrium throughout the meat and the final liquid. And that's what you're actually looking for. So just to hit it with a brine pump and expect that it's not going to be really salty, unless you adjust for that. But there's a lot of other things that you're negating in that process that is a detriment at the end of the process. So this using a brine pump isn't just a quick way to do it, but it does ensure that you're getting to that center piece of the meat. And I can tell you there's been a number of times where I have not used a brine pump and I put the bottom round in and I have corned beef through, all but 1/8 of it, but that 1/8 in the middle is this little square chunk that's just like roast beef down the middle of the bottom round. And that's not apt. People see that and they think that it's spoiled. It's not spoiled, but then again, do you really want to serve that to your customer? So brine pumps are great in expediting reaching that equilibrium, but it's not a way to just shotgun this into a finished product. So that's something to keep in mind. What I'd like to talk about now is how basically taste and flavor work, preservation, and then wrap it up back into the whole idea of what a brine is, what a cure is, and that there's absolutely no such thing as a dry brine. That's called curing. All right, so here's my art school rendition of a tongue. So we got our tongue. The classic model is in the back of the tongue we have bitter. Towards the front we have sweet, we have salty around the front and the sides, and sour around the edges. We also know that we have umami, and there's a certain genetic population that also has calcium. So this model that was basically thrown out in the 90s, and what we know now is that on the tongue, every single taste bud that's on the tongue can detect all the different tastes. Why we came up with this map is how we salivate. When we salivate, it clears off the taste buds in a manner that frees it up to be able to transmit these tastes onto the tongue. And that's why it originally, but we now know that it's all the little taste buds all through the tongue can basically sense all of the different tastes. Now, if you're a super taster, most chefs aren't two super tasters. That means you got a lot more taste buds. So therefore, everything that you taste hits a lot more intense. And so usually your super tasters aren't real food lovers. They like bland food because it's you know, salty things are so salty, sweet things are so sweet, and bitter things are so bitter. So super tasters usually aren't in the culinary arts. In the culinary arts, we usually have super sniffers, and I'm in that category. But so here's basically how we taste, what we taste, and this, believe it or not, is important when it comes to preservation of food and how we preserve food. Okay, so the reason why I wanted to go over taste in the tongue is that when we come across all the different components of taste and we take it to the extreme, it becomes a preservative, something we use for preservation. So with sweet, we have our jams, preserves, jellies, sour, pickling, fermentation. Salty, we have curing, brining, and salt packing. Bitter, we have lye curing. For example, we would use that in olives and also some techniques up in the Nordic regions of the world. Calcium, we use it for glassing eggs. Taking the eggs is a old school preservation. It's how you could take fresh eggs, load them onto a ship, and basically sail halfway around the world and still have fresh eggs to be able to cook, scramble, use in baking. And then we also have umami. Umami, I kind of shoehorn this in there. We get it through fermentation and drying, and it's where we remove water and let the glutamate stabilize it for the preservation. Examples for this is going to be like miso. Perfect examples like sun-dried tomato, where we don't really need to do anything to the tomato other than to remove some water and then let the glutamate in the food stabilize it for shelf life. Again, so we have all of our different tastes, and each one of these to an extreme becomes a preservation technique. The curing, this is a little bit more touchy. It's usually not done for really extended period of times. If it's done for an extended period of time, that's called salt packing. But this is what we're doing is we're using also osmosis. Corned beef originally fits into dry cure. So where we get the term corned is the fact that when it was preserved, it was rubbed down with all of the spices and herbs, and then the salt and saltpeter that was put on it were basically the size of like corn kernels. It was corn. When you corning has to do with the size of the salt versus like adding corn to it or something like that. That's where the term corned beef comes from. It's the size of the salt and the saltpeter used in the process. Today, it's a lot easier to use a brine to do it, because you just kind of put it in, you can forget about it, and you can rely on the osmosis to kind of regulate itself, so it doesn't end up to being too salty or not salty enough. And as you saw earlier, with the brine pump helps to get it evenly throughout large pieces of meat. There's when you think about it, it will it will penetrate the meat at about a half inch every 24 hours. So if you have a large piece of meat and you don't have that many days to keep it in the brine, it's best to use a brine pump to get it into the center of the meat and kind of let osmosis take its course. So now our brine is added. And what I'll do is I'll take plates and put plates on top of these. This will hold them under in the brine, and I will basically flip these every 24 hours or so until they're ready to come out of the drink. Once I get my plates on, basically I make sure everything's underneath it and it's square and ready to go. So after you're done the whole entire cure process, the next process is cooking. Haven't gotten there yet in this because I kind of want to put this out before St. Patrick's Day. But the whole idea is to kind of marry flavors, but you want everything to kind of have its own unique and distinct presence on the plate. And so typically we're talking cabbage, carrots, potato. So that's your typical sides that go with your corned beef, along with soda bread, mustard, horseradish. Those are your condiments that go with it as well. So the actual cooking process, typically you are going to braise it. So you're going to have three quarters of your actual cooking volume filled up with liquid, and then your actual meat, and then you have your vegetables separate. So I don't cook everything together because it's going to take anywhere between 3 to 6 hours to cook off your meat, and your vegetables aren't going to hold up to that. So typically what I do is I'll take probably about a quarter of my finished brine. So if it's going to be a quart, so it's quarter brine, 3 quarts of water, and that's kind of my ratio to actually braise this piece of meat. So it'll go in there. I'll let it go to basically you want to cook it until it's about an hour out, and then you add all of your vegetables to that and let that finish out. I've also done it where I've cooked the meat in completely. You have all the fat, everything in that broth. You take your meat out, you put your vegetables in, and then you basically stew your vegetables in that broth as well. And ultimately, you'll finish with that. If you're using bottom round, it's going to be very, very lean. If you're going to be using brisket, you're going to have a lot more fat in it. And fat is flavor, so it does taste. I think it does taste a little bit better, but everyone usually wants that lean corned beef. I'm a favor of the fatty corned beef. Luckily, on the bottom round, there's spots where you can actually have that, and it usually ends up to be the ratio of what people want to order in a restaurant. So once you're done that cooking process, I like to let the meat rest a little bit before I slice it. There is other methods of cooking corned beef, and those other methods also include dry, basically cooking it in a smoker, cooking it on a grill, roasting it in an oven. And the key thing that you have to remember when you're using the dry method is that you want to take that corned beef and you want to soak it in water for 24 hours. And what that's going to do, remember, it absorbs a quarter inch over 24 hours. What you're going to do is you're going to let it soak and remove that salt from that outside layer. So during the dry cooking process, you're not creating a salt lick around the outside of your meat. It'll even out a lot better, through the cooking process, as far as how the taste is going to be transmitted, through that cooking. So that's my advice on cooking tips. I'll add a couple things in here for you to take a look at as a finished plate. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you ever want me to talk about anything in particular, just drop it in the comments, and I'll try to make something informative. Have a great day. So here I am cutting up the bottom round. You can really see how it has that kind of square shape. Really good for sandwiches, pastrami. And here's our finished product, getting finished with the broth, served with the cabbage, carrots, potatoes. I like to keep my potatoes kind of chunky. Again, here's the finished product with the soda bread, and I gotta say, it's absolutely delicious.